Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Riker, before we get into it, we want to let everyone know the Raptors Digest is officially on all podcasting platforms, everywhere you guys can, usually regularly listen to podcasts. We are there, so definitely check us out on that if you're interested in listening to us on the go, while you're driving, all that sort of stuff, because we know YouTube's pretty difficult to get on there. So check us out on all those platforms, but you guys saw the title. The topic of today's discussion is who the Toronto Raptors are going to play in the first round. Who do we want to play? And there's 4 teams distinctly in this race, Riker, if you want to break it down for everyone listening.
Absolutely. So we're recording this. It's Friday right now. The games have yet to have been played. But the Heat, they're playing the Timberwolves tonight. You're going to hear this, obviously, the day after. I think that the Heat could beat the Timberwolves. It's close, but I think that that's possible. And the Pistons, they've been on a bit of a slump, but also have the Thunder. But I could see the Thunder probably winning this matchup, especially if Blake Griffin doesn't play, in which case we'd be in a 4-way tie from 6th to 9th place, and it's anybody's grab for who can be, of course, in each seeding. But for the topic, the thing that's the most important right now is that 7th seed, because the Raptors, they don't want to lose until the Eastern Conference Finals at most, but Finals is really what we're aiming for. So to have a first-round exit would be absolutely horrible. Devastating. So we want, in order to get Kawhi's confidence, Marc Gasol's confidence, Pascal Siakam's confidence, we really want the least amount of tension or pressure coming through the first round. So we're going to talk about who's most likely to finish in that 7th seed and who we would most likely, or who we would most want to see in the 7th seed. So Ben, maybe you can start off, or would you rather me start off with who's most likely to be there or who we'd rather see?
Well, we could focus on who we'd rather see, because it's going to be super unpredictable with everything that's happening. We can break down some of the games and all that. But for right now, the 4 teams that are really in contention are the Detroit Pistons, the Brooklyn Nets, the Orlando Magic, and the Miami Heat. The Toronto Raptors are locked into the 2nd seed, so we're going to play whoever's in that 7th spot. And, personally, watching all the teams throughout the season, the Toronto Raptors go against them. We currently have a record of 0-3 against the Pistons, 3-1 against the Brooklyn Nets, 2-2 against the Magic, and 3-0 against the Heat. We do have a game against the Heat coming up next week, so that will be yet to be determined. But my desired first-round matchup, and it might be counterintuitive as to what you mentioned at the beginning of the pod, but I want to see the Detroit Pistons in the first round, Riker.
Oof. I don't know about that. I think that they're actually the best equipped to defeat the Raptors. Well, I don't see them winning in a 7-game series, although they have had tremendous regular season success. But I think that for reasons that I'll mention after, and it'll sort of be the main point in any argument for any team, is that they really have the best ability to pinpoint the weaknesses of the Toronto Raptors. And it's something that they haven't really shown that they've been able to adapt to in the few season games that they've already had against the Detroit Pistons.
Okay, so before we debate about it, because I mentioned my pick, who do you want to see the Raptors play in the first round?
Well, I want to see them play the Orlando Magic, and okay. I also think that it's most likely that they are going to play the Orlando Magic, because assuming, and I can say it really quick, obviously it's unpredictable what's going to happen, but we can actually assume that the Detroit Pistons will finish in 6th, because they're playing the Hornets, the Grizzlies, and the Knicks. There's no way they're going to lose to the Grizzlies or the Knicks, and they'll probably defeat the Hornets as well. Okay, the Nets, they have the Bucks and Pacers and the Heat, so that's kind of a toss-up. Magic, Hawks, Celtics, Hornets, I'd see them dropping a game against the Celtics, of course. And then the Miami Heat, they're playing the Raptors. That's a loss. 76ers, that's probably a loss. Nets, and I'd say that that's a loss as well. So just really quickly, I'm saying the Heat are going to drop out. They're going to be 9th. Pistons are 6th. So I'm saying most likely it's going to be between the Nets and the Magic. But of course we're going to talk about the Pistons anyways. But I would like to see the Orlando Magic the most. And I'll get into it why, but it's for the exact opposite reason that I don't want to see the Detroit Pistons. I think that they're the best equipped because of matchups and stuff to beat the Orlando Magic. So how about you jump into your breakdown?
Yeah, certainly. I haven't really looked at all the scheduling. You have that all in front of you. I think it's super unpredictable. So the Pistons might be the least likely to end up in the 7th position, even though everything's so close. But that's who I want to see. Because personally, the Toronto Raptors this season are best equipped for a long playoff run. I don't see us playing any of these teams in the first round and losing. I think it could be a pretty solid sweep, or at least a 5-game series against all 4 of these teams, no matter who ends up in the 7th seed. And personally, I think the funnest, most exciting, most confidence-boosting first-round series will be the Detroit Pistons. If Kyle Lowry, we've all heard about Dwayne Casey, everything that he said. about Toronto Raptors fans saying that the Detroit Pistons fans are more, somehow better as they've won a championship before, they're more educated or whatever. You can listen to the podcast that we made on that video back in the day, and he's continued to fire shots at the Toronto Raptors over the past weeks. So that'd be a great narrative there, seeing Nick Nurse and Dwayne Casey go back at it. They may be 3-0 against us, but we see a lot of Pistons fans in our comment section saying that we're afraid of them. You know what? I think the Toronto Raptors should just not be afraid of any of these teams. We should play against the funnest first-round matchup, and I think we'd sweep. I think we'd sweep the Detroit Pistons despite the 0-3 record in the season. Most of those games we were up pretty big for stretches of that game, and then we kind of let the gas off, and then the Pistons came back, obviously motivated by former Raptors coach who kept the gas on the whole game. So I think the Toronto Raptors, a focused playoff, healthy Toronto Raptors, would sweep the Pistons, and it'd be the funnest first-round series to go into maybe a Philadelphia or Boston or whoever ends up playing in the second round.
I don't have as much confidence as you do in sweeping any team that's left at the bottom of the East. And the Detroit Pistons, what they do is that they have two spectacular, powerful, but undersized big men. And they're undersized at still 6'10".
Well, Andre Drummond I wouldn't say is undersized.
He's
big.
But what
he's
I'm saying is,
big boy.
What I'm saying is, I don't think that the matchup. But he's powerful, is what I'm saying. I don't think that matchup is really in the favor of having Marc Gasol out on the court, because I think that I feel like he would be exposed in that matchup. And what they're really going to do would be relying on Serge Ibaka a lot more. And that's what we've seen in, obviously, the matchups against the Detroit Pistons thus far. Now, obviously, when JV was on the team, Marc Gasol is a much more credible defender. So he probably would get a lot more run than I'm giving him credit for right now. But with that being said, I think that the reliance would be a lot more on Serge Ibaka and Pascal Siakam to defend the two bigs. And what they're able to do is, I think, a lot quicker for Serge Ibaka. They just seem Blake Griffin has a much faster first step than Serge Ibaka is able to defend, and Andre Drummond is just a much bigger body for Pascal Siakam, and that's been sort of the struggle, is containing these two big guys when they've played against the Pistons. So I'd be much more favorable. I still don't see the Raptors losing in this matchup, but especially with everything that's transpired and the fire that sort of Casey has been able to instill in the Pistons team, and then they lose it against any other team except the Raptors, right? So obviously there's something that's happening when they're in this particular matchup. I do agree with the narrative, but I think that really what you want from the first round is just the guys to be able to get comfortable playing together in the playoff atmosphere. And I think there would be a lot of pressure in the Detroit Pistons unexpectedly that they would have in that sort of matchup. I think they would thrive a lot better against one of the other teams that we're going to break down now in a second.
See, I see what you're saying. I see that the Toronto Raptors would probably have an easier first round, whether it be against the Nets or the Magic, the other teams that you brought up. But I see what you're saying about Blake Griffin as well. He's probably a bit bigger guy that Pascal Siakam would probably like to guard, as obviously they'd be matched up at the power forward position. But in terms of the Andre Drummond argument, I disagree with you there. I think Marc Gasol will be perfectly equipped to go up against Andre Drummond and be almost a kryptonite to him, as Marc Gasol is known as a big, lumbering defender, and Andre Drummond, when he's got small ball centers, and Serge Ibaka is not small center by any means, but he'd certainly probably get out-rebounded a lot by Andre Drummond, and we saw that earlier in the season as well. But Marc Gasol against Andre Drummond, we saw Jonas always have his way against Drummond in the past. Maybe he was injured in a lot of matchups this year and obviously got traded for the last one. But Marc Gasol, he can certainly body people down low. He can go head-to-head with Drummond, even though Drummond's the better rebounder, but he can certainly negate some of that rebounding ability from Drummond. And on the offensive end, because Drummond's a pretty good defender in the interior, in the paint, but Marc Gasol can really knock down the shots. He can run an offense at the top of the key and drag Andre Drummond out of the paint. And defensively, that could completely stymie the Detroit Pistons. And I think Marc Gasol would be very well equipped to go up against the Detroit Pistons, especially now that he's well integrated into the offense. And in a lot of the games that we saw the Raptors lose the Pistons, we saw guys like Ish Smith and Reggie Jackson and other guys off the bench really play well. And in the playoffs, I don't see that happening. You know, a lot of these random players, they're not going to step up in the biggest of moments. And a lot of our top guys, the guys that usually step up in big moments, didn't play great against the Pistons. So I see us having a pretty easy way with the Pistons in the first round, and having a motivated kind of a emotional series in the first round to get all the nerves out, get all the energy out, because we remember last season against the Wizards, even though we lost a couple games, that series never felt energizing. It didn't feel like into it when you're watching the games. Obviously, we didn't get many views on those podcasts either. People weren't into it until the Cavs. And then, then we played the Cavs and we were just completely shell-shocked. So I think a fun, energetic first-round series would be perfect for the Toronto Raptors. Get all those crazy narratives from Detroit Pistons out of the way. And I think it'd be super exciting.
I can see what you're saying we might have a little bit of a delay here in our audio feed, so we'll see what happens. Bear with us. But I think that I understand what you're saying about having an exciting first-round matchup. I definitely agree with that. But if you look at one of your points was about these role players, they're not able to step up come playoff time. That's exactly the reason that the Raptors would be most favorably playing against the Orlando Magic, is because the reason that they've had regular season success, the Orlando Magic, is because they're kind of an all-around team. They don't have one big superstar guy, even though Vucevic was
Vucevic has been good.
He's been good. He's been an all-star, but really, he's not the number one guy on any given team besides the Orlando Magic. It may be a couple of the worser teams, but he's not a fantastic player that's going to completely make the defense shift and change and alter for him only. And so the reason that the Orlando Magic are able to have regular season success is because they play well as an entire unit. And then in the games that they've played against the Raptors, sometimes the Raptors have come out and they haven't been completely ready with that killer mentality. They haven't been playing a team game as well. So the Magic have been able to take advantage of that. But it's exactly like you said. Come playoff time, these role players, they become much less impactful because the nature of playoffs is that you need one or two players to shine and to score consistently, because when the defense is amped up, the players that are role players, they don't get those easy baskets that they get in a regular season game. So the Orlando Magic really don't have anybody to rely on except for Vucevic, who's obviously not going to be able to bring forth any considerable points or even a victory in my consideration against the Toronto Raptors. So I think it would be an easy 4-0 sweep. But I do see your point against the Pistons, and I definitely think that for Raptors fans, it would be better to have that sort of narrative in the first round against the Pistons, or even a team like the Nets, who've been a little more vocal against the Raptors, and especially with the battle for Siakam and D'Angelo Russell at Most Improved Player.
Yeah, well, the Nets is another team we can get into, but to bring up your points on the Orlando Magic, I'd agree. I think it would be an easier series against the Orlando Magic, but personally, that's not what I'm looking for, because I think the Toronto Raptors could either 5 games or 4 games take out all of these teams pretty handily. I'm not really worried about the first round, so I think just the energy that a Pistons series would provide what makes the edge on myself a bit more, why I want to play the Pistons more often. But I see where you're coming from with the Magic. I think Vucevic could potentially steal a game because he's been sneakily good, quietly very good for the Orlando Magic this year. He's had a lot of 20-10, 25-10 games this season, but still he's okay.
A quiet all-star season, right?
Yeah, for sure. He's pretty good, but you bring up the Brooklyn Nets, and this is a team that they've crushed my soul. My whole life as a Toronto Raptors fan. They stole Vince Carter. They beat us when I was a little kid in the playoffs back in the day when we had Jose and Chris Bosh. That 2014 series, Paul Pierce ripped our hearts out on the Brooklyn Nets. And then we try to get rid of DeMarre Carroll, and they make us give up like 3 picks to take away DeMarre Carroll. So I'm not a fan of the Brooklyn Nets franchise, even though their players are pretty fun and they've done a great job over the past couple seasons. But D'Angelo Russell, he's shown that he can really take over games. We saw him completely decimate the Celtics a few days ago. So I think he could possibly win maybe a game or two. So they're a team I'd like to stay away from a little bit, and if we lose to the Nets at all, I'm just going to be super angry and frustrated. But the Nets are a pretty talented roster. There's also mentioned of the Kawhi thing, but those rumors have kind of died since the beginning of the year. But the team I really don't want to play, Riker, is the Miami Heat. It's not because I don't think we'll win. I think we'd easily beat the Heat as well. But they're just so aggressive. They're so all over the place. And it seems like every time you play the Miami Heat, someone gets hurt. I do not want to play the Heat in the first round.
No, I absolutely agree. And I don't even think it requires much further elaboration. We've seen it in a couple of matchups and players, like you said, just being overly aggressive and chippy. And sometimes that's fine, right? When you're trying to inspire the rest of your team, or you're trying to get the bench fired up to kind of go out there and do these little extra plays that don't really fall within the basketball guidelines. Of course, I'm never condoning injuring a player, but just being a little bit extra aggressive.
But
it's
they
something
draw that line.
Exactly. They cross the line. They draw it in, they cross it. Yeah, so I would totally
Kelly
agree.
Olynyk, those guys, watching them play against I'm always scared. I'm a fan of Kelly Olynyk because he's Canadian and all that, but those guys they're aggressive. They're dumb. I don't want to play, we saw them take out Fred VanVleet's shoulder in the last game of last season when we're trying to win 60 games. Yeah. That's frustrating.
But you know what? We can even conclude it on this. your points have convinced me. My gears have been churning ever since you made up you've been making your arguments as to why the Pistons would be the most desirable first round matchup. And my mind was, my sort of thinking space was completely in the realm of what would be the easiest way to get into the second round. But I actually, the point that gravitated the most with me, or that resonated the most with me that you said, was the challenge and the excitement, but not only from the fan perspective, but also from the player perspective. Because you're right, in last season when they came out a little bit complacent, or it was an easy matchup, and then they meet the Cavs, right? They were completely underprepared. So to have a more toughly fought matchup in the first round to prepare them, because second round's going to hit like a storm. It's going to be one of the top four. I don't imagine it's going to be the Indiana Pacers. I would say it's going to be 76ers or the Celtics. That's going to be a tough fought series. So I think whatever it takes to get the Raptors best prepared for that type of physically fought battle, I think that'd probably be the most ideal thing, which I agree you'd probably get from the Pistons.
Certainly, and I think it would just be so fun, and to see the Raptors fans go down to Detroit and do a northern invasion during the playoffs, I feel like that would be so crazy. It would encourage all Raptors fans. I think it would take the league by storm. It would be a great narrative to have people talking about the Raptors in the first round, and if we could sweep that team, it would quiet everyone saying that we shouldn't have fired Dwayne Casey and all that sort of stuff. I don't think it's possible that we lose to the Pistons, and if we do, we're not beating the Sixers, we're not beating the Bucks, we're not beating the Celtics. So if we lose, it's worth it to get it out of the way in the first round and then tank for whoever is next up in the draft next season.
Fair enough. Hopefully it doesn't come to that point.
Yeah, certainly. But let us know who you guys think you want to see the Toronto Raptors play in the playoffs. I know after the losses to the Pistons, a lot of people said they don't want to play the Pistons. So this might be a controversial take from my side. But let us know in the comment section below. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. As we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, check us out on all podcasting platforms. We are there now. So if it's more convenient to listen to us on there, definitely check us out.
Fair enough. I like everything that we said. Cheers.
Yeah.